We might as well get started, and then if people come, we'll welcome them, of course. My name is Gloria Nussbaum, and I'm not quite sure how I ended up doing this workshop, but Ray and I said we were going to do it together, and he's sitting at the other end of the table, so he wouldn't be helping me. Last year, well, Ray was the conference historian like forever and ever and ever, and then he decided that he wanted to not do that anymore, so I ended up with that role, but I don't feel like I even come anywhere close to what he knows. So, and also I'm on the board here at the Historical Society. I'm the secretary of the board. And other board members are Ray, well, and Margaret. Everyone knows Margaret Shetler, the archivist for this Historical Society and the conference and everything. If you want to know anything at all, she's your woman. That's a good word for it, exactly. And then Mike Barber over there in the corner is also an archivist, and he's now on the board as well. And Carolyn is a volunteer, and John behind the camera is a volunteer, and there are several others around. Anyway, welcome. What I said, I have to admit that when I came up with the title for this workshop, that I didn't even know that the title for the whole conference was Tell Us the Story. So when I discovered how nicely those two came together, I was thrilled. Actually, I did a workshop last year called Your Story Matters, and so it made sense to do one called Your Congregation Story Matters. So John is videoing this for what it's worth, and we're going to just get started and see where we end up. So thank you all for coming. It's always good to start a workshop at a church conference with a Bible verse, and so we shall. Deuteronomy 4:9. But take care and watch yourselves closely, so that you do not forget the things your eyes have seen, or let them slip from your mind as long as you live. Teach them to your children and to your children's children. And when I hear that, that doesn't sound like a question or a suggestion. It sounds more like this is what we are called to do. And Chuck Neufeld this morning basically gave my workshop for me. I was like over the moon with everything that he said this morning. Because in addition to all of this, I'm also a personal historian, and I help people record their life stories. And so stories really, really matter to me. So what's the first thing that pops into your head when you hear the word history? The Bible sometimes refers to it as his story. And one of our songbooks is entitled Sing the Story. And I don't know if you know this, but that songbook is actually the life of Jesus in song, in case you haven't figured that piece out. So just as each one of us has a story, and the other thing about history is this group maybe not so much, but oftentimes if you ask some people what they think of when you say the word history, they say facts and figures and dates, and really, really boring. I mean, really boring. Like, why do we have to be here doing this stuff? None of you feels that way, so I'm delighted. But just as each one of us has a story, so do organizations and institutions, including congregations. If these stories aren't preserved or recorded, valuable lessons and artifacts are lost, which means that we're doomed to repeat the same mistakes. But it also means that we don't know how God has blessed us, or how God has helped us in times of celebration or challenges. If no one took the time and made the effort to record their stories, we actually wouldn't even have a Bible, because that's really what the Bible is, full of stories. And then we have a little book called The Mennonite Confession of Faith. I'm going to point you to an article that we don't spend very much time on because we're so busy spending time on other articles. This is Article 4, Scripture. So I'm just going to read a little bit about what it says here. We believe that all Scripture is inspired by God through the Holy Spirit for instruction and salvation and training in righteousness. We accept the Scriptures as the Word of God and as the fully reliable and trustworthy standard for Christian faith and life. We seek to understand and interpret Scripture in harmony with Jesus Christ as we are led by the Holy Spirit in the church. We believe that God was at work through the centuries in the process by which the books of the Old and New Testament were inspired and written. Through the Holy Spirit, God moved human witnesses to write what is needed for salvation, for guidance in faith and life, and for devotion to God. That's right here in our Confession of Faith. It talks about the importance of Scripture and the Bible, which are the stories that we live by and that we consider the most important. So there are two categories. We're kind of going to get into the weeds a little bit, but there are basically two categories of things when we talk about preserving stories and preserving artifacts and papers and all that good stuff. So the question is what you should be doing with and for your own congregation is the first one. And the second is what documents are of wider interest or importance, in other words, that should end up here in this building. Let me just say a little bit about this building. There are people here who can talk a lot more about it, but the historicals, it was originally the Oregon Historical Society. It was moved around from place to place to place to place to place, and a couple of years ago we got a lovely gift, and we ended up with this incredible building. Now, while we have beautiful space, it also takes time and effort and money to maintain this. But what I want people to understand is that this doesn't just belong to Oregon. It doesn't just belong to Zion Mennonite Church. It's here for everybody, and specifically for the congregations of the Pacific Northwest Mennonite Conference. And so the fact that it's located here, that's just the way it is, but we want you to know that it's yours, and that we want you to use it, to help with it, to get involved with it, with us, and we would welcome all of that, and we can talk about ways to do that. So keeping in mind that we're going to talk a little bit about what should your church be doing and where should it be keeping its stuff and what should be coming here, that's what we're going to talk about. And we're going to divide it into basically 4 topics. So as people who are interested or who as congregational historians, these are the things we're going to talk about. Number 1, what are you or we currently doing with regard to this important work? Number 2, what could or should we be doing? Number 3, what resources are available to help us with this important work? And number 4, what are some next steps we could be doing? And we're going to make sure that there's plenty of time for you to wander around and just go back and see the archives if you haven't seen them and all of that, just to get a little sense of what's in this building. So this is for you to help me with here. So tell me, what are you currently doing to make sure that your congregation's story is being told or preserved?
How many church historians are here? Congregational historians. Are any of you? Nope. Well,
Unofficially.
do you know if your congregation has, they do have a historian?
No. We had one.
You had one, but you don't now. But you do, John.
I think so.
Yeah.
Because I have a list here, and what I'm going to do is pass this around, and if you are that person or you know who is, there's a really old one underneath if you want to check who we thought you were. And now there's this one. So seriously, because one of my goals as the conference historian was that in the 2 years that I wanted to do this, that I wanted to have someone identified in each congregation. So far, that has not happened, and I am somewhat to blame, but so are the rest of you. So, so I'm going to pass this around, and it's got the names of your congregations, and if you know the answers, or if you know what year you were formed and it's not there, if it's not right, anyway, let's do that as things are going. So I don't hear anybody. Is anybody doing anything? Do you have a person who is keeping track of things? Special file cabinets? Sharon, what's the story?
Mennonite has a historian. He's not designated historian, but he's taken on that job. And we have in the library an archival section for historical things. Not only in the library, but also in a fireproof
File cabinet?
file cabinet.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Anyone else?
Well, 11 and Midnight, Marjorie Knopfsiger was a wonderful historian, and so from the beginning till about 10 years ago, maybe, I don't know. But then we fell by the waysides and nobody kept it going, but we have all the original stuff that a lot of people don't, because she was tremendous at recording stuff.
That's awesome. That's a great gift. We just have to find somebody to pick up the pieces and put.
We tried, and so far we haven't found
Yeah,
anybody.
good. Anybody else? Well, I realize that I'm probably that person at Portland Mennonite, sort of self-appointed for some reason. And I haven't done anything either, but when I was working to put this workshop together, I got either inspired or just awestruck or overwhelmed, maybe would be a better word, with all the things that probably should be happening that aren't. But I also just found out a few days ago that there's a pile of bulletins from 2011 to current. Every week, the office administrator keeps 4 copies of the bulletin. And I asked him why, and he said, I have no idea. And I said, so like, have you done, like, are these like the churches, and then have you sent any to the archives? And he said, I don't know anything. And he just got a new job. So I left a note. I was in the office yesterday putting the bulletin together for this week, and I left a note for the next person. Please keep putting them in there and don't destroy what's there. I promise that in August I'll figure something out. And so so today I'm hoping by the end of this meeting with Margaret's help and everybody else's, that I'll actually know what I'm supposed to be doing with those and if they're of any value and how many we actually need to be saving. So that's my sad story. And then of course there's lots of other stuff too. So, but yeah, having a specific place to put it and fireproof is big.
So my question is,
Yes.
is this just congregations or organizations that we're concerned about?
We're about everybody, everything. Because every organization, every congregation, every person has a story. And this is part of what some of the folks here are going to help us with. So have some of you been doing what we're doing, just collecting stuff, but we don't know why? Is anybody else having that story?
Well, I think we have a very good process of writing
You're
things
at-
down at Salem Mennonite.
Thank you.
And we do save all of our bulletins. And we had a break-in a couple weeks ago. And one of the things they took was the ledger with all that membership, baptisms, marriages, that kind of thing. It looked like a financial ledger, and so they just took it.
Oh!
And so and we were thinking of how we were ever going to recover that, and we were thinking one thing somebody could do is go through all the church bulletins that we've accumulated. And but it would just mean, that'd be a lot of work.
That probably might have, where should they have had that, Margaret? So that wouldn't have happened, like in a safe?
Nobody ever made a copy.
Well, I think
No.
that
Nothing.
safes
No,
have been stolen.
No.
Safes have been
Todd
stolen.
does.
I have heard of that.
Yeah.
Filer lost their records actually
Really?
Really?
years ago. The San Padres place.
So one thought is to make sure that you've got a copy of everything, you know. But again, somebody needs to do that. I mean, it's better than not having anything. Although you want the original if at all possible. But I understand. Oh, I'm so sorry. That's awful. Awful. So again, just sticking with this. Do you understand the kinds of things you should be saving, or is there some confusion about that? What?
That would be helpful.
That would be helpful, okay. And again, like I said, what should be sent here, what needs to be saved at your congregation and all of that. Okay, so what could or should we be doing? I went online. When you don't know what else to do and you have a workshop to plan for, you just start Googling, right? So I just Googled, archives, church, whatever, and I came across the Methodists did a really nice thing a while back. So here's a little piece of a letter that I found, and I've got a handout that relates to it. So this is written by Sandy Kittner. She's the chair of the Commission of Archives and History in the Wisconsin Conference of the United Methodist Church. And this is more or less what she had to say. Our local church history is like so many aspects of our life. We never truly appreciate what is precious to us until it's gone. Sadly, the task of preserving the story of our local churches is often neglected unappreciated, and under-resourced. Even when a member feels called to this ministry, they can feel unsure and overwhelmed by the task at hand. The truth is that there exist numerous excellent guides and manuals on the nuts and bolts of good archival practices. And the intention of the local church historian, with many of these resources already available, is to help with this ministry. So if you or someone who feels called to the ministry of memory, I love that term, the ministry of memory. I'm just like, wow. Within your local church. So if you or someone feels called to the ministry of memory within your local church and are in need of support and guidance, you've come to the right place. Remember, your work is important and invaluable to the generations to come. So let us all strive to preserve and remember so that the future will be enriched. So that's just a piece of what she wrote that was kind of the preamble to some other information. And then I decided to split this again, and so we're going to talk a little bit about the latest word from Mennonite Church USA. I'm going to read just a little bit of what's going on there, and then at some point we're going to have Margaret tell us the truth. Because that is what we count on her to do. So I think, John, I got this from you. I thought it was actually in the printed, the Mennonite, and I only found it online. But back on May 31, it said, MCUSA Archives relocate, new director hired. So let me just quickly tell you what's going on with Mennonite Church USA. Jason B. Kauffman of Durham, North Carolina has been named full-time director of Archives and Records Management for the denomination's executive board effective July 1. He'll be responsible for planning and overseeing the relocation of the denomination's archives collection from Goshen College in Indiana to the Elkhart office in Indiana of Mennonite Church USA. So that was the first big news, that they're actually moving the archives from Goshen College to the church offices in Elkhart. Kauffman's ongoing responsibilities will include acquiring, preserving, organizing, and making accessible archival materials in various formats: paper, audio-visual, photographic, digital, electronic artifacts, etc., responding to researcher requests, and serving as a consultant to Mennonite Church USA agencies, conferences, congregations, and organizations on matters of record retention, preservation, and access. So here's a resource for you. This is this guy's job. So it goes on to talk about him and all that he's going to be doing. And then I was especially interested in the archives moving. Executive board leaders have decided to move the bulk of the denominational archives from Newcomer Center on the Goshen College campus to the Elkhart office of Mennonite Church USA. This will require considerable administrative attention and logistical execution, but I believe it will be well worth the effort in the long run, said Irvin Stutzman, the head of MCUSA. He anticipates having a grand opening for the new archives by early 2017 under the guidance of Kauffman in his new role. Stutzman notes that he consulted with parties most affected by the decision to relocate and named contributing factors. So these are the reasons, because I was curious why they're making this move. Number one, a large undeveloped section of the Elkhart office, originally designed for office expansion, is available for the archives with minimal renovation. Number two, the Elkhart office building has better climate control than the current location does. That's important. Number three, a donor couple has agreed to fund the purchase of high-density mobile shelving for the new location, which will allow for efficient use of space. Number four, the executive board will save the cost of monthly rental fees to Goshen College. The archives will be located in the same facility as several church-wide agencies and organizations, allowing for greater collaboration between the denominational archivists and the administrators who produce the institutional documents to be archived. And the archives will be located adjacent to the campus of Anabaptist Mennonite Biblical Seminary, providing better access to seminary students who wish to research denominational documents. He adds that the executive board leaders and Goshen College leaders will continue to collaborate, assuring that the archival researchers will have easy access to materials in both locations. So now you know what's going on at the top. And then I kept reading and looking. And I went on the website of MCUSA and looked under archives. I did this not that long ago, and it looks like it's completely different from when I was there the last time. And this is when I got really confused and when I was like, I gotta talk to Margaret. So here she is. So Margaret, this is what I understand, then we're gonna ask you for the truth. So conference and congregational records from, according to Mennonite Church USA, what they want, okay. The Mennonite Church USA Archives has neither the authority nor the resources to collect comprehensively the formal and informal records of Mennonite conferences and congregations. However, the archives may accept the records of select conferences and congregations as manuscript collections. Preference will be given to conferences and congregations located in regions close to Mennonite Church USA archives, in other words, Elkhart, Indiana, or in regions not served by another Mennonite historical agency. We have such an agency, it's right here and you're sitting in it. We're one of the few. Active conferences and congregations will be asked for an annual financial contribution to help support the archives. So that said to me, okay, the Elkhart doesn't kind of want 99% of what we're doing out here, is how I read this. And then manuscripts collected by Mennonite Church USA archives should document one of the following subjects listed in rank order. So then at least they gave us some ideas of what they think are important. Number 1. Denominational and agency planning, prioritizing, and decision-making not captured in official records, so they want that first and foremost. Secondly, experiences of racial/ethnic and gender minorities in Mennonite Church USA, the Old Mennonite Church and the General Conference Mennonite Church. And number 3, significant contributions to American Mennonite historical scholarship or theology. Mennonite mission and service work with preference given to work conducted under the auspice of Mennonite Church USA, Mennonite Church, General Conference Mennonite Church, mission or service organizations. So that's what I understand is they're looking for at the main archives. So what I want to know is, what does the Pacific Northwest Mennonite Historical Society want from congregations? And then my note here says, Margaret/Mike ? So that means, Margaret, Michael, whoever, can you give us some sense of the kinds of things that you would like to have from each congregation sent here? We can figure out when and how that happens, but what are you looking for? What do you want from us?
Key things are annual meeting minutes.
Can you stand up, please? Then we can actually hear you. This is Mike Barber. He's come on recently to help out with doing some of the archiving, and he's a trained archivist.
So what you look for is annual meeting notes, minutes, and with that, the annual budget. You want to keep a record of that. Committee meeting minutes are good. And if you have that with your bulletins, you have a snapshot of the congregation year by year. Alongside of that, if you would happen to have special projects that involve correspondence, that can sometimes be useful. If you have a special mission project that you do with, say, 4 or 5 churches in the community or something like that, if you have a sketch of that, you don't really need a lot of details in it. You just need to know who was involved and kind of what went on, if there was any budget and that kind of thing. And if you just have those few things year by year, you can look back and see how the congregation grew, how it shrunk, who changed where, when. It gives a good picture, a good feel.
So is that something that you want here, or is that something that we should each be keeping in our own, or both?
Well, I would say both. You would do something like to keep 5 years current, and then anything behind that probably go to the archives. some kind of a schedule to decide on, so because one thing particularly, when you get pastoral change, or you get leadership change, they will go to address whatever agenda and then realize that, hey, the congregation's already done this because they went and looked in the records. And I know this is one of the things that Rosemary found at Eugene Mennonite. We had, I can't think of the name now, but wrote the book.
Folkman?
Yeah. When she was there, she kept good records. And when she left, they didn't bother to keep the board ministers' minutes weren't there. There weren't annual reports. So you had a gap of 5-10 years that there was no record of anything having happened. New pastor comes in, they got to recreate and do the whole thing all over again. And I've seen this in more than one instance, that whenever you have the pastoral changes or when you have any kind of disturbance in the congregation, anything that goes on, you can go back in the records and maybe understand the roots of it, and
Exactly.
it makes it much easier to move forward.
We don't have to spend a lot of time recreating the wheel when we can go back and see what's already happened.
But that's the kind of things you want to keep. The other thing you want to always have current is your bylaws, your incorporation papers and bylaws should always be handy and kept current. Because occasionally you change method of operation and things, and that appears in the bylaws, that kind of thing.
Very helpful. Do you have any? Yes.
A question, if we were to start sending things, do you prefer that they are sent digitally or paper copies?
Well, that's something that's going to be worked on. I think going in the future, the way things are, likely the easiest way for people to handle it is some digital format. And that would need to be formalized. Simply because if you accumulate paper, you understand the space is limited. So at some point, we'll probably end up being digitized. I know a lot of archives now are actually digitizing and they're online. So you can actually access, and that'll be the future, I think.
That was one of my questions too. But for right now, if you don't have it in digital format and you do have it in paper, send paper because it's better than nothing at all? Is that one way to look at things, or it's?
Well, paper is useful, and I think that eventually the paper we have will eventually be digitized. And I think as we go into that, it'll be more and more restrictive as to what paper we keep. There will be some historic things like charter member lists, original charters, that kind of thing that you'd want to keep. But the ongoing stuff in digital, like the bulletins and stuff, are really, you could go either way on that.
For right now, but it's moving that direction. That was
Yeah.
one of my questions too. Exactly. And if we're going to, and if you are going to send stuff or papers, the suggestion that I've heard is like maybe do it once a year or maybe twice a year at most. Don't be sending it like every week or even every month here to the archives. Like they've got enough stuff to keep track of that they don't need each congregation to be sending their weekly bulletin on a weekly basis. Unless you do it digitally, of course, right? I mean,
Well,
digitally you can handle it. Are we set up to accept things digitally like that right now?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
But see, that's a good point. That you should be on a schedule. A yearly schedule is good. And with the number of congregations in the conference, if we had those staggered so that, say, Seattle was on April and Eugene on May, then things would be at a steady flow going through the year, and everybody would know where they're at in the schedule.
Excellent, excellent point.
Is it possible to look up to see what Lebanon might have in this building already?
I'm sure it's possible. Yes.
A lot of what's in San
Right, yeah, no, there are people here who can totally tell you, just a word too, that everybody who quote unquote works here is a volunteer, like everybody, there's nobody paid. We're just trying, we need money to keep this gorgeous building running and operating, but everybody here works as a volunteer, so yeah, so yes, by all means. Other questions at this point on this particular issue? So, what does, and this is what we just talked about, so what should the local congregations be doing or keeping in their files? And we usually think of paper, and we just talked about that. But I want to tell you about another resource that maybe hasn't occurred to you. One of your greatest resources is your people, especially those who have been around for a while. Often in life, as we get older, we feel useless and unappreciated. But this is just the time when you are becoming more and more valuable. No longer do you need to serve on boards or committees, but these are the folks who carry the history of the congregation in their genes. We need to be recording their stories, and if we don't ask, we'll never know. Again, Chuck just did an awesome job this morning. Now, I know that this may be especially true for Mennonites, many of whom may still prescribe to the quiet in the land way of thinking. I know none of you would fall into that category. This can apply not only to the outside world, but even and maybe especially to their churches, where they actually worship and have been forever. And this might be especially true if there were painful or challenging times at that congregation. But as with personal stories, it's important to let current and future generations know that life was not always easy. There were difficult decisions that needed to be made, and we may or may not have agreed that they were right, or even that we made the right one. But that's really kind of beside the point. One of my biggest frustrations when I work with individuals and their stories is that I think sometimes we want it all to be rosy and only tell the good stuff and all the successes. But the reality is that when we do that in our organizations, our churches, and our lives, we're doing a great disservice to the people who need to hear these stories. Because they're going to hear, oh, life was just a bowl of cherries. There were no problems. Well, I have problems in my life. What's wrong with me? Why am I not living a life that looks as rosy as that one? So I really, last year there was a devotional in the Rejoice devotional, the denomination's publication. And I love what this woman said. Her name is, and some of you probably know, I'm not going to pronounce her name right, Sarah Lee Gerber. And she was the writer. She said this: while I do not seek out suffering or embarrassment, I am learning that standing faithful in the midst of pain can be a witness to God's kingdom. Life's hard experiences can contribute to testimonies that share the good news of Jesus with a hurting world. Let me read that again. Life's hard experiences can contribute to testimonies that share the good news of Jesus with a hurting world. If sharing a story or risking humiliation and pain for the sake of the gospel leads others to Christ, it is worthwhile. Telling the stories is an important way to tell about God's faithfulness in the midst of difficult times. And I might add, it does not have to be high-tech. The reality is that these days, many of us carry the means to record stories around in our pockets every day. They're called cell phones. And so there's really no excuse for not doing this work in one form or another. So a few sample questions to get you started. I'm just going to read some of these. I have handouts. I made 10 I'm so thrilled that there are more than more than that. But I can make copies. Do we have a copy machine that actually works in this building? We do?
Yeah.
Good, okay. Portland Mennonite donated that machine, I might say, as the pastor walks in the door. And so I can make copies of these questions. I'm going to run through a couple of them and then we can have them out at the end. But here's a couple of things just to kind of get you started, if you don't know what. When did you start attending this church? And what were the circumstances? How old were you? What are some of your first memories? What did the building look like? Describe it. What do you remember about the worship service? Did you have instruments? Sing 4-part harmony? What about Sunday school or vacation Bible school? Do you remember any of your Sunday school teachers? Who were the pastors? What about potlucks? Do you remember any sights and sounds and smells? And where did you hold those? Inside, down in the basement, or out in a picnic out in the yard? What were some of the issues that you remember dealing with or hearing about, and if you were too young to be involved in the decision making, even if you were? Was your church a peace church? As a longtime member, what were some of the best aspects of your congregation or things that concerned you? So those are just a couple. There's thousands of questions. I love questions. I love thinking of questions. I love asking questions. Again, I loved what Chuck said. We need to be curious. Curiosity, let me just tell you, can get you into trouble sometimes. My husband's sitting here, so I have to be careful today. But I think there are times when I just have to stop asking questions because I know he's just had it up to here with my questions. It's like, at a certain point, I just have to stop, even though I might have like 20 or 30 more. I really, really need the answers to. Often we don't think much about our history until there's a big anniversary coming up. And we want to put together some kind of a book. So how do congregations write their stories for special commemorations? And what kind of research do they do? And again, if you haven't put anything away in your own congregation, or you haven't sent anything to the archives, then you've got a kind of a big hole there. If you have, and a lot of congregations have, and a lot of organizations, then we're an incredible resource here for that. So but you have to put something in order to get it back out again. If it doesn't exist, if it's not here, you can't do that. And then you're in trouble. It's important to be gathering and preserving this information all along the way. When we don't, we miss a lot, some of which can never be retrieved. And as we personal historians say, every time someone dies, we lose a library. You are a living library, whether you figure that out or not. So, last night, when I was pulling this stuff together, one of the other things that I discovered in terms of things that you might want to be, well, I talked about talking to your senior members. Ray put, I don't know, did you put this together years ago? You don't even know what I'm going to pull out of here. Service records. So these are service records not for the military, but for the church. There's a lot of people who have served with Mennonite organizations or other organizations. That's another group of people whose stories you need to be collecting. And I love this idea. And I mean, nowadays there are fewer, I think, than there used to be, because when there was a draft and the pacts and all that good stuff was happening. But this is a great little piece of paper that you can put down someone's name, date of birth, service location, and it's got type of service, during which war, church service agency. There's a bunch of these, and they're just sitting in my office, which is not like a good spot for them to be sitting. Yellow and white doesn't make any difference, but I'm going to suggest that you take this and get this back to your church. And it's another way to start getting some of the stories.
Can I add just a bit there?
Yes, please, Ray.
In addition to that, after we had that, we had, I don't know, 3 dozen or more, really, I think. People that had been different kinds of service in 1W and whatnot. And so we made a scrapbook. We had them, we either interviewed them or else they wrote about their experience, was it overseas, and what did they do, and so on and so forth. And we have that in our church library now. And I think each one who had a card in it got their own copy. But it's more than just the names and the information on that record. It's actually the story of their service, which becomes an important document, I think, in the congregation.
Absolutely. This is just kind of a way to get some idea of who you've got as sort of a first step, and then you need to proceed to get their stories. So, another source of information is newspaper articles or other public documents. If your church makes the newspaper, hopefully for a good reason, not because you got robbed, but even that's a part of the stories, I guess. But that's another place to be aware of, to be collecting information. And of course, photographs are invaluable. Under one condition, what would that condition be? Why is a photograph not valuable?
No identification.
Exactly. We don't have a clue who's in that picture or when it was taken. So photographs are only as valuable as the information that accompanies them. So if you've got a picture and you don't know who it is, it might be a lovely shot, but it's not going to be very good historically. I might add that to any piece of paper. When I was an administrative assistant in MCC and years ago, one of the first things I discovered that a piece of paper without a date is a useless piece of paper. And I don't care what piece of paper that is. If you come to my messy office, every single piece of paper on my desk has a date on it. I may not know why I kept it, but it's still got a date on it. So seriously, I mean, look around you and just, once you know this, you'll start noticing how people don't date things, which is just, I mean, it's useless without a date on it.
And oftentimes they'll date it without putting the year on it.
Right.
5/16. And often if it's a 2 or 3 page document, sometimes they won't date every page. Then they get separated and you don't know where that second one belongs.
Exactly, exactly. And it might not be a bad idea to actually number your pages. You can do that on a computer at the very last second, which I realized I needed to do before I did this report today, because I had it all done and I thought I'm going to not attach it to each other and then I'm going to lose my place. So dates on everything, pictures, pieces of paper, everything. And then this was already mentioned. It's important to have a designated place to keep these materials that's safe and that someone knows where it actually is and that that's what it is. So Sharon was saying they actually have a file cabinet. So even if you don't have a whole file cabinet, if you even just have a drawer in a file cabinet, and it's understood that that's where, and if you have a kind of a list of the kinds of things that need to go in there that Mike just told us about, I mean, that would take you a long ways in getting started on this project. And I'm planning to work with him and try to figure that out before the end. So what resources are available to help us? Well, we have these little booklets here. They are dated 1994. Some of the information in them is still relevant. Much of it is. But the thing that's really good is it kind of gives you some guidelines on what to do. And since they were from 1994, our information was incredibly outdated. It isn't anymore. Right in the middle of the book on page 10, we're down here, it's even still alphabetical. You have current information about the address here, the phone number, and our website. So, if you want one of these, please take it. And you'll find that helpful, I think. Another thing that I found, I mentioned the Methodist Church, and this was that followed that little note that I just read from their administrator. Local Churches Historian's Guide, it says, work of the church historian. We call ours the Congregational historian. There's an excellent guide available from Cokesbury for the church historian entitled, and I'm gonna, again, I have handouts, I made 10, I can make some more. Called The Church Historian, Remembering the Past and Inspiring the Future. It will guide the church historian through the main points of how to establish and care for a local church's archives, and it's still only $3.25. I looked it up online. It says, however, the main steps, however, can be summarized here. So on one sheet of paper, on 2 sides, I just thought this was like a gem. This, and like I said, help yourselves, and if you want more, I can quickly make copies at the end of the meeting. But this is just a wonderful guide, and it seemed absolutely right where, it seemed to agree with what most of what I understood we were looking to say. And it gives you some guidelines, so. And again, if you want the actual whole thing from Cooksbury, it's got the address and everything on there. You can just, Google it and you'll find it. So, how we doing? So next steps. So it's important, some of this we've already kind of talked about, it's important to have a person designated as the congregational historian. Let me emphasize that this person, if at all possible, should not be the pastor. Not because the pastor's not good at this, although he or she may not be, but because they already have more than enough on their plates. And it just seems like it's another way for someone else in the congregation to get involved in the life of the church. So if the pastor is one of only like 3 people in the congregation and they're the most qualified, then that's fine. It's not like a pastor can't. But I just want to sort of make it clear that there are probably other people who would have more time and maybe more interest in doing this. And preferably someone who has a little bit of an interest in history. So tools that would be helpful is how to store and perhaps even convince the church council that you need file cabinets. You want to be using acid-free paper and file folders. You all know that most paper, especially newspapers, deteriorate. I think they deteriorate faster now than they used to. It sure seems like it. I mean, if the Sunday paper lays out in your driveway for like 2 hours, it's already turning yellow, which should be some indication to you that this is not high quality paper. And so if you want to keep stuff for a long time, make sure it's, and you can buy this stuff, and again, go online or at many archiving stores. And then you need a recorder of some sort, and we've already established that you carry those around in your pockets these days. We already talked about the fact that it's an ongoing process, and that you want to find, and I love Mike's suggestion that we maybe make a list once we get this organized for different congregations to be sending things here on some kind of a staggered basis. I mean, that would, if we could get that done in the next year or 2, that would be just awesome. And I'm willing to help people work with that. So at this point, what would be helpful to you? And how can we get others excited or help them to understand the importance of these thoughts, suggestions? What haven't we talked about that would be helpful?
One thing that I didn't mention, often church historians keep scrapbooks.
Come closer so we can hear you, please.
Often church historians keep scrapbooks, which are the photos of social events and celebrations, weddings, birth dedications, those kind of things. So the pictures in the scrapbook. And those are really good for church history. If someone's so inclined to create a scrapbook for the church.
And is that something that they should just keep there for the time being, and then when they think they're done with it, ship it here, or?
Well, that's something that you would keep in your church, but at some point it will probably end up in the archives. But just to have a scrapbook available within the church, it's just a very easy way to casually peruse the history of the church. It's just laying there in the church library or in the foyer, and visitors and so on can actually just flip through it and look.
I love that idea, because it's a way to help younger people too, to realize that, they can look for themselves or their parents when they were younger, or it's a way to have interest and get people interested.
Just incidentally, the church I went to in Colorado did keep scrapbooks, and 2 girls in the high school youth group picked that up one day when I was standing there, and they saw their parents back in the 70s, with the long hair and the polyester little plaids and everything, and they just couldn't believe it was their folks.
Exactly.
Also, Like congregations like we have a quarterly or monthly, in our case, newsletter is called Mental Notes. And it's just filled with pictures, current pictures of kids and their picnics or whatever else. And we should be sure to hang on to those. And it mentions in here also something we not think about. Be sure to keep a copy of every hymnal your church used from way back all the way through.
Great.
Oh, I should mention this too. We have half a dozen or so of these by David Howard, Heritage Preservation. And it's a little bit different than this. It goes into more detail. It covers, what records you should keep and how to keep them and so on and so forth. So there are half a dozen or so there. If you really want to do something for your church, your congregational history, personally, take one of these for
And I don't know if those are still available or not. Do you know?
Well, I'm
Like
not
from
sure.
MCUSA?
I'm not sure. I would think
This
they
one's
are.
dated 93, but a lot of these things don't change. So the fact that it was in 1993 doesn't exactly make it outdated in terms of, it might, the form that things are in, but not the information. So I was just going to finish up with a little bit about the place that you're sitting in. And again, we have an awesome website, but the purpose of the Pacific Northwest Mennonite Historical Society is to record and preserve the history of Mennonite and related groups for present and future generations. And these include Washington, Idaho, and to a lesser extent, California. Our goals are to collect, preserve, and organize records, writings, and artifacts, minimally, artifacts of Mennonite groups, to aid historians and genealogists, and to increase interest in Mennonite history and genealogy. I actually have a Mormon friend who I found out either came here or called like a year or so ago because she needed some information. She didn't even know that I'm associated with this organization, but she needed some information and she ended up here, which I thought was pretty cool. I mean, obviously I did a horrible job of not telling her about this place, but on the other hand, she did find us, so that speaks well. And so there aren't that many, and this is where I'm not sure. Are we the only one west of the Rockies, Margaret? Is this the only sort of Mennonite Historical Society other than California, or what's the story there? Do you know?
I think basically they are.
BC has one too.
Yeah, but
In British,
that's
yes,
British Columbia
yes,
does,
yes,
and
uh-huh.
The rest of the Rockies, I think, I'm not aware of any others at least, other than like you say Fresno.
There is something in Fresno.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
the
yeah.
MDs have.
Yeah, MDs.
The MBs, Mennonite Brethren.
Yes.
Library.
So all of that to say that you've got a treasure, seriously, right here in your backyard that you may not have been aware of. And it's one of the reasons, when we discovered the conference was going to be here this year, we were like, okay, this is our chance. We can get people into this building, we can at least let you know what's here, what's available, what kind of amazing resources we have. So basically, check out our website. The number's on page 10. We're actually open on Tuesdays and Wednesdays too, just Tuesdays.
Since I'm not driving anymore,
Not Wednesdays. You're 90 what? How old are you? We just
94.
see, I mean, this is awesome. I mean, this is our living history right here, 99.
Sure.
So she still comes in every Tuesday, and Mike comes up, and we have several volunteers who work. We can always use more volunteers. We would love to have, the board at this point only meets 4 times a year. We would love, love, love to have some people other than Oregonians on our board. We're willing to work with you somehow. We could probably do some kind of a something or other to make it possible for you to be a member, but we would love to have some more board members, and we'd love to have some people from other states other than Oregon. We would love to have you send in some stories for our newsletter. We're in the process of kind of figuring out, I think it's now going to start to be an electronic newsletter, so it can get out a little more often, but it's Melanie Sprunger-Mock, who's an English professor at George Fox, is on our board and the newsletter editor, and she would love to have some input. We'd love to have you become a member of our society. There are membership forms. If they're
There are
not,
some on the table.
there are now some on the table. Okay, there are also some, we have a table over in the church right now too. That's where the money box is. So in case you're looking for where to drop your money, that it's over there. So don't forget to put your money in over there. But we have membership forms. There's some here. We'd love to have you become a member. And we have a Facebook page. And that's kind of what I have to share. Let me pass around these questions. If
Can I
you,
point out something?
yes, please, yes, Ray.
Mike and Margaret can talk about this, but on top of this bookcase here, there are artifacts. Those have to be from all the the early 1900s. That big bull and pitcher was used for foot washing services. And the small pitcher and the white one was used for baptism. And the metal press over there was the official church seal. And there's also a teapot up there.
Official coffee pot at the potluck.
I guess so. But we don't really have a good display case or room really for those kind of artifacts. But they're really important. If you have those in your congregation passed down, they should be preserved by someone, but they can't bring them here really, can they?
We really have no place.
No. That's kind of another area that's important, but we don't have the facilities right now.
That's what I have to share. I would love to have those of you who know a lot more about this building than I do talk a little bit about what's here, and then there's actually an archives back around the corner that you'll definitely want to see. It's cold back there because that helps to preserve things. Maybe that's why some people live in Oregon, is because then they get preserved here because it's so cold. Can you tell I'm not a native Oregonian? Yes, you can. So anyway, thank you all very much. I hope this has been somewhat helpful. If you have questions, there are people here who can definitely help you. And at this point, if someone just wants to kind of point out what's here and give us a quick little tour to the back, I'm good. So
I was just curious why these things are out here and not in the back. Are they not?
These are periodicals,
Okay.
collection, and part of the library, but,
because there's kind of a difference between
well,
what
there's a slight difference between a periodical
and a piece of paper that's really, really important. Yeah.
But in the archives, each congregation has a box or a whole bunch of boxes.
depending what we
And
have.
then, yeah,
Or
and
maybe
then
just
also
folder.
leaders of congregations, pastors, bishops, and so on.
You can have this more than that, anybody that wasn't, you can have more than just pastors.
Leaders in the conference.
Or more than right, the leaders.
And institutions,
Well, yes, we have about 60 different personal collections.
60 different personal.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of labels. Just take time to look around, to just wander around. Everything is really nicely labeled as well. But do by all means make sure you check out the archives. But again, that's why this building is so incredibly important. Is we finally have a place for all of this, but now we have to pay for it. Now we have to keep it up and running. And so.
Whereas before at Western, we paid no rent, we didn't pay for utilities. We had it, just that, it was wonderful. But it was so small, we just couldn't.
And we didn't have a dedicated archives cold storage kind of section to keep things there, fragile, and that's critically important.
We had a room about
18 by 18.
18 by 18.
So, and we realized we were already, this bookshelf wasn't here a year or so ago. We realized we already were running out of space to put stuff. So, but don't let that stop you from sending, because as Mike said, hopefully we'll start going to electronic as well. Thank you all very much. So, thank you. Yeah. Somebody go back to look at the archives. Margaret, show people what's back there, please.
Actually, I found my dad in one of those.
yearbooks. The Goshen?
Yeah, the
Goshen
Goshen
College.
College, Goshen
Yeah.
College yearbooks over here.
Yeah.
Most of us are here in one corner.
Yeah.
That's yellow and I have mine in here. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, yeah.
I know Gail. Yeah,
Last year, but
So this is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.